Sorry about that. Criminal Minds was on in the background. Um, so I may or may not have a thing about cults. They're very fascinating to learn about. I have never joined a cult. I just like learning about them. I can't explain it. It's just anyway. If you're new here, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Also, please subscribe. Help a girl out. That would be lovely. Today isn't really a podcast episode, which I'm okay with. But I really want to do this, and I may, like I said, I may or may not have a cult problem. I just like discovering cults and learning about them. And yes, they're cults. Try to prove me otherwise. I know technically they're religious sects, so I guess I could say religious sects in the US, but let's be honest, I ain't getting monetized anytime soon on this YouTube channel, so we might as well make the best of it while we can, right? But I thought it'd be fun to do a cult and find a cult briefly in every US state, even federal district. That's right, there's even one in DC. Surprise, surprise. So, we'll start with, we're going to go in alphabetical order now. On our very first one is Alabama. And this is the House of Judah. It is a communal group led by William A. Lewis. And in 1983, a 12-year-old boy was beaten to death in Watonka, and the group was considered a cult. I never personally heard of this, but then again, I was born in 96, so I get it. Yeah, this was before my time, but hey, the older you get, the more you learn. I just happen to be fascinated with cults. Also, let's move on to one of the coldest states in the U.S., Alaska. Yes, it is very cold. I could not live there. But I did find out it's the place where most serial killers go. Just saying. Um, so, in Alaska, there is a cult called the 241 Plot. It is the Schaefer Cox, also known as the Schaefer Cox Militia. And this is a sovereign citizen anti government militia movement that involved a plot against law enforcement in 2011. And then Arizona has one of the most well known cults in the US. Can you guess it? Can you guess it? Can you guess it? Da da da! The FLDS. And this is led by Warren Jeffs. And this is a sect that operates in Short Creek area on that operates on the Short Creek area on the Arizona-Utah border. It is characterized by a polygamous practice, strict obedience to a prophet, and intense sex abuse, leading to Jeff's life sentence. Yeah. In Alaska, there is something called the Kobais. Now, you're probably thinking, what about Jonestown? Well, I was really wanting to, and I saw this one. I was like, okay, I kind of have to do this one now. But, um, the Kobais is a historical communal group in White County led by a man named Cobb, also known for his intense and violent and erratic behavior for the resulted in murder. Now, let's move on to our C's. We have California, and before you get on me for not doing the family, yes, that is a well known cult in California, and boy, do they have a lot of them. Just saying. But in California, there is something called Heaven's Gate. In 1997, 39 members of the UFO religion committed mass suicide, believing that their souls would ascend to a spaceship from beyond the Hale-Bopp comet. Interesting. Also, there is something in Colorado that has been defunct, and I remember seeing this one on the episode of Dateline. Can you guess it? Can you guess it? Love is One. And this is based in Crestone, and it was a group led by Amy Carlson, who went by Mother of God, and she was found dead and mummified in her home in 2021. And there were results of bizarre metaphysical beliefs and online anti black and anti Semitic rhetoric. Then let's talk about move over to New England real quick where we talk about Connecticut. In Connecticut, there is a cult or religious sect, whichever one you want to call it, called King's Chapel Bethel Church. It is located in Norwich, and this group is linked to a sister church in England, and survivors have described it as controlling group that has separated members and families, in some cases use of threats. Now, um, let's talk about Delaware. Yes. Believe it or not, Delaware is the only D state in the U.S. Yeah, I know. But in Delaware, there is something called the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. While the group has global presence, and former members have described the church as intense control over daily life and cult like, reports of the 2025 indicate that while members of this group are declining nationally, it has seen growth in Delaware County in the Pennsylvania area. With these stop the group purchasing multiple properties as well. Let's move on to Florida. Let's just face it though, Florida is a cult in general. Florida man, for crying out loud. If more specifically, we're going to be going to Miami with the nation of Yahweh. Yahweh. And Yahweh Ben Yahweh. And this group is from 1980s, was linked to violent crimes and murders, with the leaders claiming to be the Messiah. Awesome. Let's move on to Georgia. You would think there would not be a cult in Georgia. Surprise. There is. And it's called the House of the Christian Church. And former members of the church has several locations in Georgia and have described cult-like behaviors, including extreme financial control and coercive practices. And the group was raided by the FBI in June 2022. Let's move on to Hawaii. Yes, Hawaii. Okay, so there is something called Science of Identity Foundation, and this is led by Chris Butler, who was a former Hare Krishna member, and this group isn't active in Hawaii and is described as reclusive authoritarian with significant following of local politics. Now let's move on to the I states, because why on earth do we have a lot of I states? Can someone please explain to me why we have a lot of I states? Anyway, uh, in Idaho, we have to do it, the FLDS. And this is a polygamous offshoot of the LDS Church with members operating in Idaho. And recently, concerns about children in Idaho being taken to fulfill more unjust prophecies. In Illinois, there's something called the Stell community, which is also known as the Doomsday Disciples. And it is historically known as a Doomsday community founded to survive global apocalypse, and it has been noted for its unique and isolated and highly regimented structure. Then let's move on to Indiana. Not Indiana Jones, but we're going to be talking about the People's Temple that is responsible for the 1978 Jonestown murder that originated in Indianapolis in 1955. And Jones blended Christianity with socialism, moving the group to California in the 1960s, following criticism for his integrationist views against Native Americans. Then, let's talk about Iowa. Believe it or not, something actually happens in Iowa. Apparently, there's a cult there called the Satanic Temple, which is not defined as a cult by sociological standards. The Satanic Temple of Iowa has faced significant scrutiny and is reported by the KCCI News and was denied a holiday display at the Iowa State Capitol by officials who cited concerns about the nature of the display. Yeah. Let's move on to Kansas. It's not all Wizard of Oz, but um, in the United Nations of Islam, that was born in Kansas City. This group was founded in 1978 by Royal Jenkins, who claimed to be Allah in person. In Kentucky, there is a World Mission of Society of God. Believe it or not, yeah. And this is a South Korean church with a presence in Kentucky, often described in online forums as a cult due to intense um recruitment and indoctrination practices. Let's move on to Louisiana. Now, I was gonna make a joke, but I was like, "Yeah, let's not make that joke on this one. Mainly because I don't want to get any voodoo put on me. Because there is a Louisiana voodoo, and this is a blend of West African spiritual traditions with Roman Catholic, and is often misunderstood and misrepresented in cult activity. Now, in Maine, there's something called Shiloh from 1896, and this was established by Frank Sanford in Durham, Maine. And this group was characterized by strict obedience, forced fasting, um, and abuse. And Sanford claimed to be a reincarnate of Elijah and King David. This guy is the Lulu, one thing. Um, then let's move on to Maryland. And if I thought there was a lot of I names, why do we have so many M name states for crying out loud? Now, Maryland is Lamb of God, and this is based in Baltimore, Catonsville area. And this was 1970s charismatic covenant community described as former members of High Control. And let's move on to Massachusetts. And this is the Boston Disciples, aka Boston Church of Christ. And this, and many people have described this as a high pressure group that lures individuals with intense Bible studies, asking for financial commitments. Let's move to Michigan. My nose has stopped up. I'm sorry. But in Michigan, there is something called the Church at Carson City. And this is a reclusive group with a reported that is reclusive group with allegations of sexual abuse by leadership and strict cult-like control over members' lives. In Minnesota, there is something called River Red Fellowship in Pine County. And this is a notorious abusive religious cult by Victor Bernard, who resided near Filesian, and the group operated as a secluded compound with leaders and who demanded obedience and eventually convicted of sexually abusing followers um, before being called maidens. As he made them call them maidens. You can say it, I know. In Mississippi, there is something called the Church at Sapa. Aside from many Dollar Generals they have, this is a cult that is a remote religious community led by Sam Fife, who teaches the teachings of the wilderness and drew on people to rural Mississippi communities. Missouri. There's something called a Grand Cosmic Family, which is associated with Rashad Jamal, and the community prompted a police investigation in 2024. And after people disappeared from their homes in eastern Missouri. Now, let's talk about Montana. Um, in Montana, there is something called the Church Universal and Triumphant, and this is led by Elizabeth Clare Prophet. This is a New Age group that gained attention in 1980 for its doomsday prophesizing and building bomb shelters in Yellowstone. Yeah, okay. Um, I know this is the rabbit hole I dug myself down. I can't judge. I can't. Don't pity me. Please don't. Also, don't judge me, please. Um, let's move on. Since we're finally done with all these M states, let's move on to the N states. And we're gonna start with Nebraska. And there is something called One Whole Heart Ministry in Greenwood. And this is what some neighbors would suspect that this group has been occulted to its emotional high energy services, while others seem to deem it as a welcoming space. Then let's move on to Nevada. There's something that actually happens in Nevada besides gambling and prostitution. And it isn't owned by government. And this is Red Rock Consecrated Sanctuary located in Lemon Valley, Nevada. And this is a group that's widely considered cult like. Then let's move on to New England. That's right, we'll go into New Hampshire. You know, New Hampshire, you might have heard of the 12 tribes. And here's the sad part, I would go to Yellow Deli just to see it and try it out. There was one in Chattanooga, but they closed it down. Yeah, they closed it down. But anyway, this group is often characterized as a coercive religious community accused of using child corporate punishment, enforcing unpaid labor, and demanding separation from family. Let's go to the armpit of America. That's right, New Jersey. And there's something called People of Hope. And this is a religious group where a compound in Warren Township accused former members of strict control, forced separation from families, and child abuse. Let's go to New Mexico. Okay, so there is something called Lord of Our Righteousness Church in Strong City. It is led by Wayne Ben, and this group has settled near Clayton in 2000, with members living in trailers and RVs, and Ben claimed to be a Messiah and sentenced to 10 years in 2008 for the sexual misconduct of underage followers. Let's jump back up to New York. Um, and there's something called the Sullivan Institute in Manhattan. And this is from a 1960s to 70s Upper West Side group that functioned as a psychotherapy cult. Now, let's move on to our north. We'll start off with North Carolina. And this is the Kingdom of God Global Church, led by David Taylor, who claimed to be an apostle, and he has been accused of operating um, a scheme involving forced labor and financial exploitation with operations in multiple states. Now, the last of our North and the last of our end states, North Dakota. Um, there is something called Tagus Church Legend, which is a former Lutheran church in Tagus that was historically rumored to be associated with cult activity, and though is often regarded as an urban legend rather than an organized cult. Interesting. There's something called in Ohio called Dove Outreach, and this was in Waverly, and this involved a case of with family-based sex cult. You know I had to be on that list when I saw that, right? Yeah. Um. Now let's talk about Oklahoma, and I'm losing hair constantly. Lovely. There's something in Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Church of God. And this was founded in 1918 as a splinter of the group, and this organization is headquartered in Edmond and regarded by many ex members as a controlling sect. Let's talk about Oregon. In Oregon, there is something called Trinway, and this is a new age group based in Ashland City by Aushka Sanada and Shakoma, which is centered in Haven location, focused on elevating human consciousness. Let's move on to Pennsylvania. Well, there's a cult or religious sect called the Society of Women in the Wilderness, which is a German pietist group led by Johannes Kelpis in Philadelphia. Often considered America's first doomsday cult. I had to add that. Yes, I had to. You know why I had to. Then let's move on to Rhode Island. And this is called the Attleboro Cult. In the late 1990s, a fundamentalist group known as the Body of the Attleboro gained notoriety in the southeastern Massachusetts Rhode Island area. This is led by Roland Robideau, a group member who rejected modern medicine, leading to the deaths of 2 children and the incarceration of several members. Now, let's talk about South Carolina real quick. Um, in South Carolina, there's something called Word of Faith Fellowship, and this is on the North Carolina South Carolina border in Spindale, North Carolina, which is based in Spindale. It has more influence on the border region. with numerous reports of accusations of abuse, and former members were described as a cult in its testimonies about past abuse. In South Dakota, the FLDS. Do I really need to go into further detail? No, but this is the most prominent cult activity in South Dakota, and it involves the FLDS. Let's move on to Tennessee. I knew about this one actually, and this is the Remnant Fellowship Church. I watched a movie on it and did my research on it. But anyway, this was founded by Glenn Shamlin in 1999, and the group teaches that weight loss is the path to God and demands strict adherence to leaders' teachings, with accusations of extreme control and isolation. Let's go on to Texas. This is the Branch Davidians, and we all know the famous story behind this one. Utah, the Kingston clan. Perhaps you've seen the show Escaping Polygamy. Yep. And this is a polygamous business oriented group operating in Utah with a high degree of isolation and strict internal loyalty. Let's move on to Vermont. Something called the Zizians. And this is a small reported informal group of nationalists led by Ziz the Lasota. Now let's go on to Virginia and talk about the Finders. And this is an intentional community with new religious movement founded in Virginia and D.C. in the late 1960s, known for its unconventional belief. Let's talk about Washington. This is the Church of Christ at Armageddon, aka Love Family. Founded in 1968, a communal group with highly active members in the Seattle area. Then there's West Virginia, which is the snake handling cult. Specifically, churches in West Virginia have practiced snake handling for over half a century with studies of congregations in areas like Scrabble Creek. I know I'm not going. That's for sure. Um, then we have two more states, and one of those is Wisconsin. And this is the Love Holy Trinity Blessed Mission, an organization that presents itself as Catholic, is active in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa. But it has been scrutinized and engaged in behaviors commonly known with high control groups under leader Keo McDonald and Father Len Cruzel. And then let's move on to Wyoming. And this is the Church Universal and Triumphant, aka CUT, and we've talked about this one. Yeah. Now let's talk about Federal District of DC, aka District of Columbia. And this is the Mother of God community, which is a Catholic charismatic covenant based in the DC area, which has faced many scrutiny regarding its leadership styles. Thank you for tuning in, and if you'd like to do more, see episode on more in-depth research, please let me know. Y'all have a great day.